Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at gcnlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@usaprepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Well, good morning, America, and welcome to the show, and everybody who may be listening all over the world. My name is Rich Scheben from offgridmontana.com, and I'll be sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I've got a couple of disclaimers. First of all, those of you who have listened to me and listened to this show, you know that on USAPrepares.com, we do stick up for the little guy. So it doesn't matter what rationale we use. It could be financial, economic, social, political. It could be discussing how political correctness has destroyed or is trying to destroy America. And it's all in the context of giving information, ideas, solutions, suggestions to the little guy who's running out of options because of the lack of representation, rights, and even restitution under the law. So I want to thank, first of all, Jason for engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. And I'm going to give another disclaimer of sorts, if you will. And I'm going to start by reading the front page under News and Radio on the left-hand column in my website, which is offgridmontana.com. And I'm just going to quote this. Well, quote myself because I put it on there. It says, please be aware that I will continue to do radio/TV shows, but will no longer continue to add them to my website because they are being censored and even audibly changing words, phrases, or are deleting segments of the shows. We are living in a real live, virtual reality, politically correct Twilight Zone episode, diluted by censorship and surveillance. Thank you, Rich Scheben. And the reason why I mention this, folks, is this so-called disclaimer of sorts is because for the last year plus, and it's really accelerated in the last few months, it's very hard for me to make phone calls, for phone calls to come in, especially if it's in the context of any commerce. Emails are being eliminated, whether I'm sending them out or they're coming to me. My book reviews, if you go on Amazon, for example, and you look at my book reviews chronologically, in the beginning for when my book came out, and you look at the positive reviews, the length of time that people spent writing about the book, complimenting the book, compared to the newer reviews, and they've literally deleted some of the older reviews and replaced them with newer reviews that are obviously derogatory because they do not want political correctness, ideas and solutions, or truth of any kind to get to the masses, because the masses their will must be broken and they must be submissive for the status quo to feed their addiction to power, money, and control. And even in my book, I've had books show up where the introductory chapter was gone, the table of contents was gone, the first chapter was gone, the second chapter was gone. I've had books come to me where, my book is being printed out of Lightning Source, just FYI, and I don't know if Amazon's behind it, I don't know who's behind it. But some of my phrases, my words, they're being switched around or deleted or omitted or put in different places. So we really are living in this 1984 Orwellian nightmare. We're actually way behind it. We're in the book burning era of America. And the reason for me reading what I said on my website is because they're literally taking words I say, and they've had this technology for quite some time. They can take your audio words, use your name, and make you say anything. And they can do it live time. They can actually do it video live time. I know that's hard to believe, but I've mentioned this over the past. And for those of you who are regular listeners, if you recall, remember about, 3 years ago, I'm shooting from the hip here, there was an actress, I think she was an Israeli actress, who played Wonder Woman. And I'm reading all this stuff online and saying, people are saying, why is she doing porn all over the place? Well, she's a millionaire. She's a famous actress. Why does she need to do porn? Well, anyway, it turns out that they have the technology now to take every body part, every mole, every tattoo, your hair, your eyes, your birthmarks, whatever. They can literally make you do anything on audio and video today. Now, there is sophisticated regarding legalities that can be done by checking watermarks and things of that nature. So it all depends on what the circumstance is. If they're breaking the law, can they get down and dirty and really find out if it's a real or fake video? Yes, they can. But for the layperson on the Internet, they can basically do and say anything they want today. So if I get disconnected, which has happened, or if I can't get back, and Jason, if you're listening, feel free to try to call me. I don't know if it'll be successful, but just about a month ago when I was on with Vince, they wouldn't allow me to call out. So I had to go outside up on a hillside with a cell phone and call up the engineer and have the engineer call me, and I was able to get through. And this is happening on a regular basis now. So what I'm going to do today, folks, is, as usual, for those of you who have heard me on the air, I plan on being as politically incorrect as possible. In other words, I'm going to stand for principle. And for those of you who haven't heard me define standing for principle, it's basically 3 criteria. It's not rocket science. It's not some great innovation. It's just common sense and logic. And the first one is we need to have the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody. The second one is truth. Now, when I discuss articles, which I'm going to discuss some today, or data or statistics, I try to get them from credible resources. And the studying that I do and the reading and research that I do, I try to give you the information in as few words as possible. So if I read an article, sometimes I'll glean maybe 2 sentences, maybe 3 sentences out of it, instead of going through the whole thing and talking about just, say, 4 articles over a 2-hour period, which a lot of people do in talk radio. But I like to give as much information as possible, hopefully get you guys curious enough to do a lot of reading and research on your own. Now, going back to standing for principle, after truth, the last one might be the most important. And that is if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they are from. And when I say group, I mean skin pigmentation shade. I mean sexual orientation. I mean gender. I mean religion. So if someone has less consequences for their behavior because of what group they come from, then you get to do it too. And I've been asking everybody, the White House, the Pentagon, every governor, for practice what you preach laws. And I've defined that and given multiple examples over the years. Nobody wants to do it. And the reason is because it's a lot less left-right paradigm. It's a lot more the aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. This is just the reason for big tech. Look at where the jobs are in censorship and surveillance. And of course, from the layperson's perspective, why does everybody try to become a Hollywood celebrity or an NFL or NBA star? because that's part of the distractions. You are paid well to distract the masses with bread and circus. And of course, if you can dumb down the populace, and I give examples all the time, I've probably given countless examples of this. One of my favorites is professors, one at the University of Illinois, saying that math is racist. Math is white supremacist. Math should not be objective. It should be subjective. Does anybody realize, I know this audience does, how stupid that sounds? But this is what they're saying. Lowering the bars of standards and expectations, not just in the context of getting a job and keeping a job, but literally dumbing down the public so the elite can put a veil over their eyes and make them believe and see anything for the purpose of having them being controlled. And of course, division. I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. I'll probably talk about it again today. In fact, I have an article here about Candace Owens, so I probably will get down and dirty into being politically incorrect. And the tool division is, excuse me, is very obvious. We cannot lower the bars of standards and expectations in any way, especially for getting a job, and expect to reward mediocrity and make our country better. Okay, I had to get a drink of water. About an hour ago, I had some granola. Don't eat granola or peanuts or cashews or anything like that before you're going to talk, even an hour before. Okay, so I'm going to just start going into some articles, and I plan on going into many tangents, and I plan on telling the truth, and I hope I am the most politically incorrect person on the airwaves today. Okay, first article. Conservative icon George Will, America needs as much immigration as the economy can support. Next article. I'm going to give them in clumps. Okay, I love that word, clump. Okay, because I'm going to try to put my message with several articles in context, and I'm going to try to give as many facts as possible. Next article. Mexico refuses to name international figures bankrolling migrant caravans. Let me repeat that. This should scare the bejesus out of everybody. Mexico refuses to name international figures bankrolling migrant caravans. Next article. New Mexico in crisis. Handing out welfare to illegals like candy. $1,000 EBT cards. Next article. California begins free health care for illegals. And I'm going to talk about this in detail. I'm going to back things up with facts, give you my perspective and point of view, and let you know how the American people are being fleeced. Again, stay with us, folks. Thank you for being here, and I will be right back after the break. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I just mentioned several articles about immigration right before the break. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And I know it's a very politically incorrect topic, but my job is to stick up for the little guy, and especially stick up for the American little guy, the bottom 93% of income earners. And I'm going to start with something I've mentioned in the past. It's an inflation chart. And I'm going to mention the top 6 increases, the highest reasons for inflation, and that is hospital services, educational textbooks, college tuition, car insurance, medical care services, and prescription drugs. So I'm going to basically put those in 3 categories, okay? I could probably put it in 2, but I'm going to do 3 just to put my message in better context. So basically it's health care, it's college and education, and I'm going to put car insurance separately. Now, when you look at health care, folks, and think about the topic that we're discussing here, immigration, and I'm going to mention a lot more statistics. When someone can walk into a hospital, especially an ER, that costs a fortune, where we can't even go. We have to wait for the week to occur because we can't go into an ER because we can't afford it. And yet somebody who has illegal immigration, they can't be, collection agencies can't track them down. They can say they have no money, and they get free treatment. Now, this has nothing to do with what skin pigmentation they are, nothing to do with what gender they are or what gender they identify as or what sexual orientation or religion they are. I'm just sticking up for Americans who have been paying for taxes without restitution rights or protection under the law for years. Of course, all depending on what group you come from. So the cost shifting that occurs when somebody can walk into an ER, it's just like when somebody goes bankrupt. Okay? When someone goes bankrupt, what does the innovator, the creator, the corporation, what do? They raise the prices so other people have to pay for it. It's the same thing with when you walk into some type of healthcare facility that you don't have any money for. They're not going to turn you away, so they're going to make mostly the middle class foot the bill. Now, college, whether it be tuition, textbooks, doesn't matter. What happens when illegal immigrants can walk into a college? Maybe at worst pay residential fees. That's called cost shifting. Same thing. Same thing with public education from kindergarten through 12th grade. When a child walks in there who might be an illegal immigrant, the fact is, whether you're a proponent of this or you're indifferent to it, that extra tax for the public education has to be paid for by American taxpayers. Again, mostly the middle class. Now, car insurance. An illegal immigrant can legally get a driver's license in some states. They can legally drive a car. And even if they don't legally drive a car, they often do. And what happens when they get into an accident? Nothing. They don't even go to jail. And if they do, they get right out. But if it was one of us who got into the accident, we have to pay for whatever fees and policies and dents and medical emergency and everything that we're accountable for. So again, mostly the middle class pays extra fees for certain policies because of cost shifting. And this is what's happening in America. And what a lot of this illegal immigration does, it foments hate, race wars, and it's done for the Democrats to give votes to them because they are bought and paid for by the globalists. And I'll go into more detail and specificity after the break. Welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I just want to, when I go over these articles, when I give commentary and opinions on the information and news that's out there, I want people to realize that we are in a very precarious, unprecedented place where we've had over 1 million combat soldiers die for our freedoms and liberties that we enjoy today. And I think we should all feel like we owe those people, especially those 16 and 17-year-olds who lied about being 18 years old, who stormed the beaches of Normandy during World War II to make us free, or else we'd be speaking German and Japanese right now. So we have to remember that we're all in this together. The silent majority must read up, research up, and speak up. And we can't hedge our bets. Our bet should be for the American people and not seeing who's going to win. It kind of reminds me of back in elementary school, and I've mentioned this before. I remember some of the, some of the older kids in elementary school when Ali was fighting Frazier. This is back in the 60s. Some of the kids would say, Ali, Ali, Ali. And the younger followers would be, Ali, Ali, Ali. And then 5 seconds later, the kids, that's the attention span of kids, right? They go, Frazier, Frazier, Frazier. Implying that we all need to root for Frazier. And then the followers would scream, Frazier, Frazier, Frazier. There's not much of a difference right now if we hedge our bet. We have a Bill of Rights, we have a Constitution, we have laws. And if we have a separate-tiered system of rules, laws, and accountability based on what victim group status or protectionist group status somebody has, which is all theater to divide us. These are all divide and conquer strategies. There's no legitimacy in any of it because everybody, every individual has a special skill set or at least a special passion that wakes them up every morning with a desire to succeed, to have fun, to help others. So that being said, before I talk more about immigration, I just want to mention a quick 2-sentence quote from Mark Twain. In the beginning of a change, the patriot is a scarce man, and brave, and hated, and scorned. When his cause succeeds, the timid join him, for then it costs nothing to be a patriot. Mark Twain. So it's pretty obvious what the implication is. We have to stand up for our country. We have to stand up for our people, especially the little guy, because the little guy no longer has representation, rights, or restitution under the law. It all depends on what group you come from right now. So I'm going to mention some facts that I've read in articles over the last year-ish, and I'm going to mention them quickly, and I'm going to mention, just to keep it in context, as few words as possible. First, we have to remember that this is done for the voters. This is done for the votes because the Democrat Party, where you can end that with a P, it's up to you, personal choice, they have been hijacked by the globalists. In other words, they're bought and paid for, same as the mainstream media. So the first fact, over 1,000 Americans killed by illegal alien criminals every year. It's actually in the thousands in some years. So who are the victims? Mostly poor and middle class. Over 900,000 convicted illegal felons roaming the streets. This is an old statistic. Have we seen how many people are coming over the southern border lately? Next, much more crimes committed against the poor and the middle class. Next, fact. This is a quote, we are sending a clear message. Just because your child gets across the border, that doesn't mean the child gets to stay. Unquote. That is a quote from Hillary Clinton. It's not a left-right paradigm, folks. It's the aristocracy controlling and managing the serfs. Very little left-right paradigm. Much more aristocracy managing and controlling the serfs. Now, we're entering a new age of robotics, automation, artificial intelligence, which I've talked about in great detail over the last few years, and how that will take millions of American jobs, and it's already taking many American jobs. So when we bring in people, whether they be low-skilled, unvetted, and they're doing most of the crimes against the poor middle class, is it really worth our is it worth it to the American people, especially the little guy who has no representation, to just open up the borders willy-nilly without vetting? I don't think anybody opens up their home to any stranger without vetting. That's why you have locks on your door. It's not because you hate the people. It's because you love the people inside. According to the CBO, which is the Congressional Budget Office, 1 in 5 illegal aliens will go on food stamps if Congress approves DACA or similar programs. Next fact. Non-citizen, these are federal government facts, by the way, okay? Can you imagine what the facts really are? Because the federal government skews everything. And we've talked about this in great detail, like inflation, CPI, unemployment, GDP. I know I've talked about that in great detail. And given time, I'll even talk about it again today. So the federal government's facts, non-citizens account for 22%, more than one-fifth of all federal murder convictions, 18% of fraud, 33% of money laundering, 29% of drug trafficking, and 72% of convictions for drug possession paid for by the American taxpayer. Now, I don't understand, I live in northwest Montana up here in the northern Rockies. My dream as a young boy was to come out to the northern Rockies and live this mountain man life, live off grid, hunt and fish, live off the land. And that's what I've been doing after my 20-year stint in corporate America. And I never looked back. And when I read statistics, Montana is number 1 for meth use. Now, granted, it's a per capita number. I know that can be debated. But with all this nature that we have here, and I should probably deviate into nature a little bit too today if we have time. But as usual, I have about 18 hours of talking points with only 2 hours to do it. So I'll shortcut a few things here and there, but it's always tough. Next statistic, American people are broke. 80% are living paycheck to paycheck. And again, people, it's not about skin pigmentation or sexual orientation or gender or religion. It's about the fact that the American people are broke, okay? Very few toddlers. Kids are much older than they say they are, and 80% of illegal alien children enter the U.S. without their parents. They say they're part of the family, but it's not. A lot of these kids are actually adults. Again, Trump doesn't want to shut down the borders. Nobody does. They just want to vet skill sets. Like, let's say you hire a contractor to build you a shed. Okay? I'm shooting from the hip here. If he never built a shed before and has no carpentry experience, would you hire him? Or her? I'm pretty sure the answer to that would be no. Skill sets need to be vetted. This is just common sense and logic. Okay, next fact. More than half of foreign refugees on taxpayer-funded food stamps. 1 in 3 caravan migrants have some deadly disease, HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, tuberculosis. Now, these are incurable diseases. These aren't diseases that, you live with and it builds your antibodies and immune system. These are diseases that kill you. Next fact, 63% of non-citizens on welfare food stamps, almost 5 million household programs used to help ailing American citizens. So all these millions of Americans who don't get help because the cost shifting has occurred to illegal immigrants, is that fair? Especially when people have put into the kitty. It's like Social Security. You put into the kitty, you take out of the kitty. We shouldn't have a kitty that someone doesn't put into and takes out of. So this is why we need top-down funding. Let the Rob Reiners and the Bloombergs and the Bezos and all these people who say, oh, white male, but yet there's no talk about confiscation of monies from these families, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. It's Soros's, all these people who are screaming, white male. But no, they're not screaming white male. What they're really screaming is let's basically keep everybody down and blame it on the poor middle-class white male. But in the meantime, let's use females, let's use transgenders, let's use blacks, let's use Hispanics, and let's poison us against each other. Let's foment hate so we aren't in the spotlight. That's exactly what's going on. Next point. Most organizations represent the wealthy. So when you hear words like class envy, it's a bunch of BS. And I've done whole monologues on that. But because of time, I'm going to just keep going to bullet points here. Lawyers and judges who allow illegal immigration and do crimes against Americans should be swiped clean of all wealth and given to the family of the victims. Called accountability. The same rules, laws, and accountability, right? We don't have that. The cost of illegal aliens, $100 billion per year. Next bullet point. We the people have no representation rights or protection or restitution under the law. Next bullet point. 80% of females coming through southern border in Mexico get raped. That was a big article a few months ago. And illegals, 31,000 people for medical treatment under 17 years of age, $98 million spent so far in health care. And this is an article that was a few months old. So the cost shifting that's occurring has nothing to do with what people they are, where they're from, what country, what skin pigmentation, what gender. It has nothing to do with that. It's the fact that the American people are broke and they've been paying for the cost shifting, and they don't have any representation under the law. And this is what we need to do something about. Okay, I'm going to go to my next clump of articles, and there's only two here. And I do this because, as you can hear the music coming, I never have enough time. I never do. So I will mention these two articles and do commentary after the break, folks. Thank you all for listening today, and I'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, folks. I know this is going to be a short segment before the heartbreak at the top of the hour, so I'm going to be as quick as possible here. The next two articles I'm going to talk about are obviously going to be very politically incorrect, and I'm going to go for it here. But we have to remind ourselves that pretty much everything is a psyop. It's a mind game. This is why you hear racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, homophobe. You hear about climate change and global warming and conspiracy theorists, all hater, anti in front of every word, ism, ist, phobia on the back of every word. It's all divide and conquer strategies to make the people submissive to break their will. That's it. That's all basically the left has, because they're not JFK's party anymore. They've been bought and paid for and sold out the American people to the globalists. So when you cheat on voting counts and you're buying time with distractions and divisions, and you're anti-truth, and you're anti-middle class, and you're anti-individualism, and you're anti-free speech, which is the rule of law, and you're anti-people controlling their own destiny and not having any more options. Do you want to really live under that flag? We have to also remember that Obama put millions of dollars into the Defense Department for propaganda news. We've talked about this. This came out and was declassified. CNN, BuzzFeed, and this is along with the CIA and other alphabet agencies. This is all paid for by the taxpayer dollars. This isn't new information. Why do you think in the last few months there's been so many layoffs? Because they're running out of money. He even put in millions of dollars to fund race wars regarding the propaganda. It doesn't matter. If there's two people who maybe they have a weird lifestyle or they're ashamed of their lifestyle, the powers that be are going to take those two people and call them a victim group, a protectionist group class, and they're going to use those two people against the American people. It's an exercise in making people submissive because they're afraid to be called extremists, controversial, racist, bigot, sexist, misogynist, conspiracy theorist, intolerant, violent, hater, et cetera, et cetera. So what Obama did, he legalized lying and made it legal fraud. I mean, I'm reading articles that RT, Russian television, from reading the comments and listening to the people who watch it, has way more credibility than our own mainstream media. So, with that said, I mean, I can go into so much depth. We just don't have the time. I'm going to read a couple articles in my next clump, which is just 2 articles, and then I'm going to get really politically incorrect about it. First one is Candace Owens blasts scam of feminism in passionate TPUSA speech. Do you think those women are happy? And she makes it very clear that they're not. Next article, Yang, identity politics. He's the guy running for president. It's a very poor way to win national elections. So I think the left is realizing that any subset under political correctness, that the people are waking up to it. And what a group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status does, it's not being liberal. People are realizing these are divide and conquer strategies. And if you read Marx, Alinsky, Communist Manifesto, Cloward and Piven, the Frankfurt School, you can see how we're so drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness and that the powers that be are using group identity politics. Why do you think they call it identity politics? Because they don't want the people connecting the dots. But the people are being used. We are allowing the elite to poison us against ourselves. And this is why government interventions, confiscation, austerity, redistribution of wealth, all under certain disguises, like words like humanitarian or democracy or sustainable city or Agenda 21, global warming, climate change. This is all leading to a loss of individual rights. And hopefully if I have time, I'll talk about that in some detail today. But I really want to get politically incorrect regarding what Candace Owens has said. Now, for at least in our lifetime, there will be an effect known as the Kavanaugh effect. Basically, where every white male heterosexual is a gang rapist, and that they are not proponents of adult mutual consensual sex, mostly to hide the pedophilia. But when you really look at the fact that so many industries, even Wall Street is saying not to book hotel rooms on the same floor, don't sit next to women on flights, this isn't doing them any favor. And I'll go into more detail and specificity after the break. Thanks for holding on, folks. Welcome back to the show, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli. 1 hour left. I appreciate you being here. We're getting politically incorrect right now because we talked about group identity politics and another article that was referring to what Candace Owens was saying about feminism, on how it's misleading, and most of all, it's making everybody who's involved in that ideology miserable. And I was talking about the Kavanaugh effect, on how Wall Street and many industries are literally saying that hiring and I'm quoting, just hiring women these days is an unknown risk, and how every white male heterosexual with a Christian name is now a gang rapist, even though Hillary Clinton called black men super predators. See, nothing means anything anymore. It's all theater. It's all show. It's all swaying public opinion. That's all it is. It's manufacturing perception. Even though the same people said different things and flip-flopped just a few years ago, it doesn't matter. It's about selling. Just selling everything. Now, another quote. It's amazing how empowered women seemingly transition into damsels of distress whenever it suits them. Candace Owens has talked publicly that the war is against the war on men. And I've mentioned a few articles. They came out, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago, and I've referred to it in a paraphrase, and I'll do that right now. Basically, less than 30% of men want to be married because they've been financially destroyed. You know, they lost their homes, lost their kids, lost their pensions, and then they have to pay for the bill. When somebody who quits a marriage or quits something because they have a higher amount of victim group or protectionist group status, and they, regarding math on the balance sheets, can be a quitter and make the profit. And I also mentioned that article dovetail with Sharia law proponents. When you look at the birth rate in America, where Sharia law proponents can marry children, they can have 4 wives, the birth rates, fertility rates, I don't care what you want to call it, they're much higher. And American men, Western men, don't even want to have kids in so many instances anymore. Then you dovetail that with a 70 to 75% divorce rate in America. Basically, it's very plain to see how a lot of these feminists are really being used, duped, played, conned by the powers that be for a divide and conquer strategy to eliminate the traditions, the heritage, and the culture that made America great. You don't lower the bars of standards and expectations for a job and expect anybody to believe that they've earned it. And when you don't earn it, the satisfaction, everything is the appreciation, the value, the dignity of work is almost eliminated. It's not liberal to have some of these behaviors be appropriate in whatever group you're in. Now, when Democrat Congressman was saying that Kellyanne Conway looks familiar on her knees, can you imagine if any white male Republican was to say that? Heterosexual? How about Joy Behar calling Bill Clinton rape victims tramps? How about the New York Times being on record defending and normalizing pedophilia and defending NAMBLA, the North American Boy Love Association? You know, there's so many things that don't get discussed because you want to hedge your bet and be politically correct. If we said it like it is and had the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, we would be so much less divided, because the divide and conquer strategies have brought down every society. How about when women realize, let's take, I'm not trying to stick up for Harvey Weinstein, but you know, he's in his upper 60s. He's had one or two girls, 20 to 30 years old, on each arm for many years. And let's ask the question, does he have these young girls by his side all the time because of his phenomenal personality, his wit, his charm, his humor? No. But see, when women break out this feminist malarkey and they ask for lowering the bars of standards and expectations and accountability for themselves, they don't point out when the gold diggers and the mistresses, basically it's money for sex, right? When they pull off these behaviors, the women don't say anything. It's discrimination against men with no restitution. And when female genital mutilation occurs in America by the thousands, the feminists say nothing. It's crickets again. And when 80% of females, including young girls, show up in caravans where 80% have been raped along the way, there's more crickets from the feminists. You know, Congress has had a bimbo slush fund since the 90s, which has cost up tens of millions of taxpayer dollars to pay off these women. And the feminists play their cricket violin. Stormy Daniels and all these so-called porn stars who are going after Trump or anybody on the right, they get put on a pedestal. Again, that shows that America's drunk on the Kool-Aid of political correctness. When we don't have courage, folks, we'll never be the land of the free and the home of the brave again. How about pedophilia grooming gangs everywhere, taking your children, ladies, and the feminists play the cricket violins? How about killing babies after birth and making it legal? How about 80,000 Americans dying from drugs that come over our borders? How about 80% living paycheck to paycheck? You know, we don't try to judge people. I don't try to judge people on their sexual orientation. I don't get it. Okay? I don't understand, but I'll tell you one thing, that we don't know what goes on behind closed doors. Now, when somebody, you never know what happens behind closed doors. Is one partner saying no to sex too often? Is one partner letting themselves go physically, and then no longer they've given up? This is why we can't listen to so-called victim groups. We have to have the same rules, laws, and accountability and take everything on an individual basis. I've mentioned this over the air before, I've had lots of women come up to me over the years and talk to me about their boyfriend or their husband. And you know what? You always try to listen a little bit and you try to help. Lately, I've been very intolerant in the listening category with this, and I just tell people, I tell these ladies that, you know, I can't help you, because what I did a few times, I went behind closed doors, and I talked to the guy, and I said, she said this, she said this, she said this. And you know what you get? You get a 180-degree different story. So unless you're living behind closed doors with those people, we really should keep our mouth shut because we don't know the facts. You're allowing a certain maybe empathy or sympathy towards somebody who might have a certain victim group or protectionist group status, and you don't listen to both sides of the story. And we need to get back to that. You know, there's so many websites about college girls looking for sugar daddies. Everybody, I use this terminology over the air often. It's called adult mutual consensual sex. Why should we waste taxpayer dollars and resources if people want to have sex and it's legal? If it's adult mutual consensual sex, no children, no rape, but yet what they want to do is divide us. So, in lieu of fixing our debt or finding the $21 trillion that Dr. Mark Skidmore in Michigan found that was missing from the DOD and HUD, we're wasting our time on stupid stuff. And here's another fact. How come women bought 80 million copies of Shades of Grey? For those of you who don't know what that is, I think you should look it up, and I think you'd be pretty surprised. And I've mentioned this also. This was about a 2-decade phenomenon. It was probably a decade or two ago when it ended, but every television show, every magazine, every newspaper, so-called, even Christian women were saying, this is my starter marriage, implying that she married this guy maybe to use him as a sperm donor, and she was going to sue him down the road. He's in the background thinking like, oh my God, I just said till death does us part, in sickness and in health, to my God and to my witnesses. Well, apparently that doesn't mean anything. So when you see people saying that every female should be believed, unless they're raped by a Bill Clinton or a Keith Ellison or groped by a Cory Booker, it doesn't matter because they come from a different side of the aisle. And for those of you that really think the Democrat Party is still the JFK Party, you're mistakenly wrong. You've been misled. You've been duped. You've been conned. You've been played. And you've been used as a tool of division to poison us against ourselves. And yes, that is supposed to not make a lot of sense grammatically, but it's meant to make a point. So what I'm going to do now is go to my next clump. I love that word. Maybe because I do a lot of gardening. I'm going to go to my next clump, and this looks like it's going to be economically based. And I'm never going to get to everything, but I'm going to shortcut as much as I can. Next article, my bank in Denmark just offered me a negative interest rate to borrow money. In other words, they're getting money to borrow money. Next article, trader stocks won't stay bid. They're paraphrasing the article here. Trader stocks won't stay bid, bad news, because of Fed cuts, only 25 basis points. Basically, with all the bad news in the economy, which we've talked about in great detail with a lot of data, a lot of statistics, a lot of math, a lot of numbers, Trump is going to keep us out of a recession because we have the ability to paper over the numbers. And I'll go into more detail after that. And next article, Amazon launches credit card for deadbeats. Not kidding, not making it up. Be right back, folks. Welcome back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli today. And I am going to finish my next clump. Actually, I'm combining two clumps to make one clump. And let me know if I get too technical in my jargon, but I just like that word. Anyway, next article regarding the economic topics and my economic 101s that I'm going to try to go into in some detail. I'm going to obviously have to shortcut a lot because we only have a little over half an hour left. Next article, Congress can't act fast enough on recessions. This is from Bloomberg. Next article, what collapsing orders for heavy trucks down 71% from a year ago say about the U-turn in trucking. Next article, this wasn't supposed to happen. U.S. employment, U.S. Employment, not unemployment, employment growth just plunged to the lowest level in 9 years. Now, we know about the consequences to our economy, and you know how I feel about a lot of these unit measures like inflation, CPI, and I've talked about all this in great detail. GDP, I mean, how can you create $4 of debt to achieve $1 of economic growth and call it a legitimate unit of measure or calculation? How can you talk about unemployment when 100 million people are out of work? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the economy, and one of the articles here from Denmark was about interest rates and people getting paid to take out loans. I've talked about this in quite a bit of detail, and I talked about QE for the people, not in the form of inflationary measures where, for example, if you print to oblivion, modern monetary theory, MMT, or UBI, universal basic income, or more QE, which if they do, it's going to be under a different name or heading, I'm sure, where you bail out the banks, Wall Street, and the elite. When you flood the market with unbacked fiat paper dollars, you're going to create an inflationary, a possible hyperinflationary situation. So if that happens, the bond markets will crash and yields will go up. The last thing we need is yields or interest rates to go up because the system is too fragile. Now, the corporate bond market is held together with basically glue, paper, and spit. We have like a quarter of the small cap funds are zombie companies, meaning that they don't have enough cash to even pay interest on their debt, on their loans. So I think if they want to crash the system, they'll just raise interest rates like they did in December, and everything will be tumbling down. So we have GDP that's over 140% of the economy. Regarding the whole equity market, could be a big reason for basically starting a recession, which they want to avoid. Today's stocks, bonds, real estate's over 500% of the economy, highest ever on record. So when you look at those asset bubbles, they got to keep those bubbles literally blown up. Debt over 300% of GDP. So there's a lot of ways that they can destroy the middle class and put the bottom 93% on a permanent caste system. They could ban cash. We're already seeing delinquencies and bankruptcies going through the roof. The powers that be are even speculating about earnings based on guessing and reasons why to buy stocks. So we're in a very precarious place. We've seen the monthly collapse in job growth for May, and this is with a unit of measure with gig jobs. And this is why they want to use big tech to silence people like us, is because whether it be financial, economic, social, political rationale, doesn't matter. No speech that questions the official narrative is going to be allowed on any platform. And that's one of the reasons why my phone calls, my emails, and everything is being compromised. The Fed, they want to demonetize every patriot, every American out there who sticks up for truth and sticks up for the little guy. So the Fed looks like they've priced in several rate cuts to extend bubbles, and it's going to be very interesting to see if that happens and how far they go. Be right back after the break, folks. All right, we're back, folks. Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli. Website is offgridmontana.com if you're interested. And I was talking some Economic 101 data. I was mentioning some articles, and one of the articles was talking about Denmark and negative interest rates and people being paid to take out loans. Now, President Trump said he's going to transfer power back to the people. So let's look at that Denmark article and just glean some ideas from it. And this is stuff that I've been talking about for years regarding, instead of giving QE to printing money out of thin air and bailing out the too big to fails, too big to jails, basically welfare for the rich, the Wall Street and the bankers, fractional reserve lending, banks getting lending more money than they have, and of course stock buybacks, which we've talked about in great detail. Because of time, I'm not going to go into it right now. But basically, everything has been welfare for the rich, bailouts for the rich, too big to fail, too big to jail type thing. So why don't we take an example like what Denmark is doing? It's pretty obvious that interest rates have to go down. And America is not the worst country out there. When you look at debt to GDP ratio, we're probably in the 12 to 15, depending on who you read and what you believe. So we're not the worst ratio out there. But when you have 80% of the people living paycheck to paycheck, when you have 40% of the people coming up with $500 for an emergency, that's dire straits right there. Look at our homeless situation. I just mentioned about Amazon creating credit cards for people who are totally broke. So they're basically going for every penny of business they possibly can, because we don't have legitimate supply and demand of free markets anymore. We have a fixed rig system. And this quote from Ayn Rand really says it all. Quote, when you see that trading is done by compulsion and not by consent, when you see that dollars or money is flowing to those who deal not in goods but in favors, when you see men get richer by graft and by pull, basically meaning deceit and fraud, using one's own high position of power, especially in public office, to obtain certain profits or advantages, and your laws don't protect you against them but protect them against you, when you see corruption being rewarded and honesty becoming a self-sacrifice, you know that your society is doomed. So President Trump, why not take the long end of the yield curve, the 10-year and the 30-year, let all the people, from the little people to the big corporate oligarchies who are running zombie companies, let's everybody refinance. Refinance your mortgage. And let's take that long end of the yield curve down, possibly to negative interest rates. And then incentivize people at the end of that fiscal year when they take out a loan. Let's say we have 3% negative interest rate. They get paid 3% of what they put into the kitty, of what they paid. They get a little money back. So if they do the right thing, instead of trying to enforce delinquencies and bankruptcies and things like this, let's give people a light at the end of the tunnel program. instead of bailing out all the super wealthy every time, can we help the little guy for a change? So we could do means testing. We can increase the years of mortgage from 30 years to whatever. We can take the mean household debt and give that amount to each home instead of QE to the super wealthy. And I've made it very clear that GDP doesn't build happiness. And if we could get rid of a debt-based currency and dismantle central banks along the way, and possibly even audit the Fed, and get rid of all this malarkey that comes from the super wealthy, like, oh, it's class envy. No, it's not. That's why they do group identity politics, a.k.a. victim group status, a.k.a. protectionist group status, because they have to divide us so we're not seeing the criminal activity and manipulation and corruption behind the scenes that they're doing. We have to remember civil rights policies were designed to ensure that Americans should be based on individual merit. But that means nothing anymore. Appreciation, value, dignity of work means nothing. They're spending our taxable resources on dividing people by skin pigmentation, by gender, by sexual orientation. We have separate laws. If we have separate laws, not just for the people who have victim group status, but also the super wealthy, we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Civil rights are individual rights, defined as a right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These rights are equally held under law. But if law is all bought and paid for, if our lawyers and judges are all bought and paid for, nothing matters. When I went to attorney, I went to 30 attorneys. I couldn't hire one of them. They wouldn't take my case. They said as a poor/middle-class white male heterosexual with a Christian name, I had no group self-pity points. I'm not making this up. I've said this on the air many times. It's also in the book. Amendments to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights guarantee that no state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. But when groups of people are given special privilege through corporate structure and government entitlement, life, liberty, property, and even due process are being erased for many of us. So, how do we control our own destiny? I've been on the air for years talking about practice what you preach laws, talking about the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, talking about standing for principle, talking economic 101 all the time, making it very clear that the left is the Nazi, not the right. They're the proponents of the socialism, communism, authoritarianism, tyrannical dictatorship, fascist state. How come they want to control the media? Not the people, not the little people. How come the left wants to get rid of citizen journalists, the new media? President Trump should sign an executive order that half of the White House and half of all media need to be part of the new media, the alternative media. How come the left wants to control the police and let Antifa go wild, paid mercenaries? How come the left is a proponent of no due process? How come the left is a proponent of government school controls and not allowing parents to control the curriculum and not even allowing parents to homeschool their children? How come the left is a proponent of private property invasion by the police? How come the left buys and pays their lawyers and judges to sell out the American people for justice? And you can throw bankers and politicians in there. How come the left allows for voter and election fraud? We need to start acting like citizens, folks, not subjects who expect the government to work for us and not the other way around. Now, we're not anti-government on this show. We're anti-too big government, too corrupt, overspending, incorporated, elite control, manipulative, anti-constitutional, anti-rule of law government. So we have to start thinking of ideas and solutions that benefit us. And if we continue to be hyphenated Americans, the elite are going to win. You're going to be told what to do, what to say, how to think, and who to do it with for the rest of your life. We're in uncharted territory, not just for corporate debt and household debt, which is over $14 trillion, but we are in a very disturbing place where we can go from a deflationary, stagflationary environment to a hyperinflationary environment quite quickly, especially if they continue to print money and give it away, especially to the elite like they do, and give the little people crumbs. So this is why the globalists need to be proponents of fake news. They're proponents of props, lies, propaganda, false flags, hoaxes. They need to control what we think, what we say. They need to control our currency, our trade. They need to control hate. They need to control good, bad, up, right, left, right. They need to control the status quo. We are in a global slowdown, and the jobs reports are looking poor. A lot of things are unraveling. It's a lot less trade war consequences than it is the end of an economic cycle. It's analogous to, it's a lot more aristocracy controlling the serfs and a lot less left-right paradigm. Now, I'm looking at the clock here. I'm not going to get to probably half of what I was hoping to, but I just want, during the last break, I'm going to totally change subjects here, and I'm going to talk about two articles and go into something different. First article, leaked FDA study, toxic forever chemicals contaminate many foods. Next article, National Park removes glaciers gone by 2020 warning. What they're saying is that, Al Gore and all these leftists and all these bought and paid for scientists who are saying that global warming or climate change is going to kill the planet, the polar bears would be dead by now and cities would be flooded, and all these predictions, like this article about 2020, there won't be any more glaciers left in Glacier National Park. It's all a bunch of hooey. Climate change is not related to man activity, so to speak. It's more related to solar activity, polar shifts, and geoengineering and weather modification from the Monsantos and the Rothschilds and the people who own patents. That's the only weather modification that's happening. It's by the elite who are trying to control climate. So that being said, and boy, we can go into so much detail and specificity on that, but I'm not going to have time. During the break, I was looking out my window. I was looking at my garden. A big raven came down. We have about 15 bird houses here, and I got chicken peeps walking around, and we have hawks and eagles, and we're right on the river here. And a big old raven came down trying to, attack some of these babies, whether it be wild or my domestic chickens. And my Great Pyrenees dogs chased the raven away. They are chasing everything from ravens to fox to coyotes to raccoons to otter to black bear, mountain lions, grizzlies. I've had lots of grizzlies here. If you go on my website and go into the picture gallery, go into wildlife pictures, trail cam, whatever it's categorized at, you'll see I got grizzly bears all over my place. I don't even keep the pictures anymore. I get so many pictures of grizzly. In fact, I've got a ratio of 3-to-1 grizzly bears to black bears. But we'll talk about a little nature when we get back on the last segment, folks. Thank you for being here. Well, thank you for joining us today. This is Rich Scheben sitting in for Vincent Finelli, and we really appreciate you being here, folks. We really hope that we're making a difference, trying to give you information to at least be curious enough to do the reading and research on your own and to look behind the veil, behind the wall, behind the smoke and mirrors, so you can have more options, ideas, solutions, and better your life. where the options are obviously getting more and more compromised by the day. But before the break, I was talking about how my Great Pyrenees dogs chased away an aerial attack by a raven. And if it wasn't for these dogs, I wouldn't have a goat, a chicken. I wouldn't have a carrot in my garden. I've got about 25 to 30 different species of vegetables in the garden. And I've been picking, for over a month now, spinach, lettuce, Swiss chard, kale, asparagus, and it's just a lot of fun. And for the last few minutes of this show, I just want to talk about the importance of building your immune system and thinking about immune stimulants versus immune suppressants. You know, when people think about immune suppressants, the first thing that comes out of to their mind is sugar, and that is obviously the case. But there's a lot of immune stimulants that a person can grow, like onions and garlic and hot peppers. Ginger is a good one. We don't grow it here, but horseradish, cabbage family, which is cabbage, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. And I know cauliflower, as per Sandy Cortez, is racist now, but I'm going to say it. Anybody, don't tell anybody I said that. So we need to start thinking about immune stimulants to fight the cancer, just like how important nutrition is, hydration, exercise, sleep, excess exposure to chemicals to keep that down. There's so many food-like products out there that they even call it fat-free, which is usually code for high sugar content. Basically, America is overfed, unnourished, and under-exercised. So we have to think about the synthetic pharmaceutical drugs that we take for so many conditions. Now, the immune system deals with 6 major things: inflammation, circulation, allergies, infection, detoxification, and cancers and tumors. If we could I even harvest a lot of edible and medicinal plants. I hunt and fish for my own food, for my own fish. Don't even own a freezer. Can most stuff. Now, when you look at some of the consequences that you have to pay for today, like red dye in your meat, green, non-meat grown in laboratories, and sold in restaurants. This is, for those of you who think I make this stuff up, I don't. Okay? I get this stuff from published articles in the public domain, every bit of it. I don't make up any of it. I know it sounds like I'm making it up, but to continue, steroids, hormones, antibiotics, GMO foods, and it's very obvious that there's enough evidence out there that GMO changes your DNA and causes cancer. How come 96% of Monsanto shareholders voted years ago to not disclose what's in GMO ingredients? Pesticide-fed cattle, cloning livestock, modified proteins and enzymes in lots of foods. This affects, they do it for the greater shelf life in the stores and in the field, but it also affects bioavailability, absorption, and nutrients, and excretion, and metabolism, and homeostasis in the body. Basically, even nanotechnology is tracking food from the farm to the fork. So why not use this as a reason to build skill sets? And when you pick something out of the garden, whether it be a strawberry, a raspberry, a cucumber, a tomato, I don't even care what the season is. Now, seasonality sure makes a difference, but when you pick it fresh from your garden, folks, there's nothing like it. I've had 2 groups of people here just in the last 2 days giving a garden tour because people want information. They know that there's glyphosate and everything. They know that vitamins and minerals come from the soil. They know that a lot of American soil or soil around the world has been chemically and mechanically beat to smithereens. And this is why eating raw food is so important, because enzymes act as catalysts for biochemical reactions which aid in digestion and nutrient support. Now, when we cook our food past 130 degrees, and I've read even lesser temperatures will kill your enzymes, we're eliminating all the benefits of eating food. So we have to take in proper nutrition, which is getting tougher and tougher and harder to find, especially if it's store-bought. Again, think immune stimulants. I have an acronym out there called SARP, Synthetic, Artificial, Refined, and Processed. If you just think about that and try and keep away from and eat those products, MSG, aspartame, high fructose corn syrup, nicotine, all these artificial sweeteners made to be addictive, if you eat them in moderation, I think we'd be a lot healthier. People, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a great week, and start your garden.